Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. This is Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council. And it's Friday, but it's another great business as usual. Very excited to speak to our guest today. And I think all of you will be very interested in the story and the development of JazzHR. I will introduce Pete in one moment, but before we do, I want to make sure that I'm giving deep appreciation to our sponsors, which is Huntington Bank. They've been with us right from the beginning, and they've helped through the pandemic and making sure that people get access to SBA loans and all the things that we all continue to grapple with. They've been great partners. Also 40 by 80, it is the 501c3 affiliate of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and we're leading many of our efforts there to support entrepreneurship and workforce development in the region. So we've muted your microphones. We want to make sure that that we don't hear anything in the background. And we also have a chat so that we can ask questions of our guests, which is Pete Lamson, CEO. And those questions and comments in the chat are not meant to sell. They're only meant to ask questions of our guest. So I want to thank everyone for being here. And I want to thank Jonathan Kirsting, who's with us. He's Vice President of all things media and marketing at the Tech Council, and tells lots of stories. And you may have seen just a recent launch of a microsite, which is called Get PGH, which includes many of the stories that we're going to continue to tell over the next many months ahead. So I'm very excited to have Pete Lamson, CEO of JazzHR, who's joining us today. And welcome to the program, Pete. Really happy to have you here. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're busy, but can't thank you enough for the time that you take with us.
Delighted to be here, Audrey. Thanks so much for having me.
Well, let's just talk really quickly. Just talk about Pete yourself. Like, who is Pete? What's been your journey? How did you quickly get to the role that you're doing now in terms of JazzHR, and maybe just a little bit of some of the roots of JazzHR in Pittsburgh?
Sure. So I joined JazzHR 5 years ago, and prior to my tenure here, I've spent the majority of my career in technology-based businesses, typically early stage or emerging growth, almost always, at least initially, venture-backed. Some hits, some misses. Immediately prior to JazzHR, I was with a company called Carbonite that was a venture-backed business based in Boston, and terrific run, and we had great growth. We went public along the way, and left there, as I said, 5 years ago to join JazzHR, and which was sort of a typical career step for me. Again, a really promising technology and underlying product, going after an underserved market, small businesses, trying to help them improve recruiting efficiency, built by Don Charlton, who was in Pittsburgh and stays active in the Pittsburgh community to this day, remains on our board to this day. So the company was founded in 2009, and with the idea that small businesses who typically recruit with some hodgepodge of either Microsoft Office tools, Excel, Word, email inbox, and so forth, or G Suite tools, could perhaps use the same type of assistance in improving their efficiencies of the business that we've seen in sales with all the different CRMs, Salesforce and others, and marketing. You've got HubSpot and Marketo and others, and every vertical area has improved the efficiency of their business. And HR is unfortunately often the last to the party, and certainly recruiting fit in that bucket. So there's a big market opportunity that Don attacked, and that we've been pushing hard against ever since.
And so the title back then was Resumator, right?
It was.
The name of the company was Resumator.
Yep.
And then what about the switch to this new title? When did that happen?
That happened it was before I arrived. Okay. I believe it was in the beginning of 2015, maybe late 2014.
Okay. So we know you now all as JazzHR. So can you tell us a little bit about Jazz? So before we start talking about all the information that you're actually privy to in terms of what's happened in 2020, tell us about, give us your pitch. Tell us what JazzHR is, why people should use it, and what problems you're solving.
Sure. So our target market are small businesses with between 50 and 500 employees. And typically those businesses use very manual recruiting processes that they can be effective, but they're very time consuming and cumbersome. And again, it's we probably all have the experience of you post a job on a job board, you get a flood of resumes. You need to, maybe you get 100 applications for a role you're trying to fill. You want to get back to everyone, even if you're not interested, to be respectful for them. You've got to call through all the resumes that you might want to talk to. You've got to schedule interviews. You got to go through all the background checks and skills assessments. And hiring is a tough thing. And arguably, it's the most important thing that any company does. I mean, we all can't be successful without having the best people in the roles we need them in. And so what JazzHR does is we don't necessarily take away the decision-making capabilities of that hiring manager or that HR person or that recruiter, but we make their lives a lot easier. So for example, if you wanted to post a job on 10 different job boards, you'd have to go to each job board and post that job. Maybe it takes 10 or 15 minutes for each one. If you're a subscriber to JazzHR, or our competitors as well, you post at one time through our software, press a button, it automatically goes out to 21 different job boards. You can set up automatically what we call screening questions or knockout questions, so that every candidate who's applying, maybe they have to answer 3 or 4 simple questions, and then you can really focus your time on reviewing the resumes from those candidates that answer the questions that are going to be indicative of the type of background that you'd see in a candidate you're going to be interested in hiring, or at least talking to more. And the folks who perhaps don't fit the profile you're ideally looking for, you can set up an automatic email that's a very polite, professional thanks but no thanks note that goes out to that person. And so all these things I'm just giving a couple of examples, but all these things that are so time consuming, you can do in literally seconds once you're kind of set up. And the same is true for offer management and background checks and skills assessments and interview scheduling, which is oftentimes the bane of everyone's existence, because it is a goat rodeo trying to get everybody on the same page when they can interview a particular candidate. All of that becomes automated through our software. So it's a big time savings, which means it's a cost savings. It means you get better, ultimately, hopefully you'll hire a better person, and it's a better candidate experience. So it helps your employer brand as well.
Yeah, that's really great. And it helps with consistency too.
That's right, exactly.
And so your sweet spot in terms of company size. So if people are listening to this and thinking about their companies, where's your sweet spot in terms of size of company, or it doesn't matter?
Yeah. So well, again, we say 50 to 500. I would say ideally, and our pricing, we're priced to be affordable for that small business. So, for that 50-person company that is still going to be very budget conscious, you can get into JazzHR for as little as $39 a month.
Right.
And then we have, if you will, call it a good, better, best pricing plan. So you can, if your budget and your needs warrant, you can get a little more advanced capabilities from our product solution. So I would say the sweet spot is really anywhere in that 50 to 500 range, as we laser focus on that. Having said that, a company with 500 employees is really, really, really different than a business with just 50 employees.
Right.
So that's why we have different products to meet those different the different needs of the organizations with those different sizes.
Well, actually, we have a partnership with JazzHR for our member companies, and Taylor will put some of that information up for people to see. So we really appreciate that. Your commitment to Pittsburgh has been considerable. So let's talk a little bit, because you have some expertise, and that expertise allows you to understand what's been happening in 2020 when it comes to people, right? In terms of hiring.
That's right.
And there have been just some, what I think are some permanent, changes, and, to hiring, to staffing, to where people live, et cetera. What are the trends that you're seeing? Like if you just flip back the past year.
Sure. I mean, there's which markets or which industries have been the most impacted, which have, I won't say necessarily benefited, but which have flourished in the difficult time. And then there's, of course, the notion of how we recruit and hire people is in all likelihood permanently changed, to your point, Audrey. So maybe I'll touch on both. So with the benefit now of we've all been kind of in this period of COVID work environment for about 9 months, and it's enough time that you can have some perspective, and some of that fog of war that we felt in March and April when we didn't know what was happening is now a little more clear. And there's both there's negatives clearly, and there also are a lot of positives though. And you know, the industries that have been most negatively impacted, and this is not new news, but it's really the service industries. And there's a couple of exceptions, but it's, you know, restaurants, it's hospitality, it's health clubs, and then some things that aren't service related, like education, right? And because with so many schools now working remotely and so forth, that has impacted hiring in the education vertical. But overall, it's the service economy that has suffered the most. And at the same time, concurrently, we've seen tremendous hiring in like the healthcare verticals, in technology verticals that are enabling all of us to work from home, in nonprofits, interestingly, and in manufacturing. And the sort of tragic thing about all of this is that, and this is true nationally, it's certainly true in Pittsburgh, is that there is a dichotomy of the skill sets between those that have suffered job loss in the service economy and where the jobs are, where the jobs with a high, or the industries with the highest growth rates are today. So let's say I'm a trainer in a fitness club, and I might be the best trainer in the city of Pittsburgh, but the health clubs are suffering right now, and in many cases they're closed. And unfortunately, if the healthcare industry is hiring technicians, well, my skill set as a trainer might not necessarily fit with what's being hired for in the industries that are growing. And that's the tragedy of this is where we have seen high unemployment, the skills aren't necessarily a good match with the industries that are hiring. So that's been a real challenge. Early on in the downturn, we saw in kind of March and April, we saw a big drop in new jobs being posted. In the aggregate, a 60% drop of new jobs posted in March and April from where we were previously. That has since rebounded from the end of April until end of November by about 200%. So that's the positive, but again, it's not in every industry. And that's the kind of heartbreaking thing about this is that in certain industries, it's still really hard to find talented people given the kind of the markets they service and the employees they're looking for, and the folks that are now suffering through higher unemployment may not have the skills that those companies are looking for. So kind of macro level, that's what we're seeing both nationally and in Pittsburgh. And then in terms of your question on has employment changed and therefore has hiring changed? Yeah. You know, we don't know what it's going to look like when we all go back to the office, you know, hopefully later in 2021. My personal perspective is that it will not look like it did before. But having said that, I also don't think it's going to be a complete pendulum shift the other way to where everyone's working remotely. I think remote work is going to probably be more common. But I think people are looking forward to getting back into the office. There's that important, social component of work every day that's enjoyable. And there's also the shared organizational learning that we all benefit from when we're all together. That's, Zoom and other tools we use are terrific, but it's not the same as being with folks. And then as a result, we certainly are seeing increased usage in some of the recruiting tools that are available to hiring managers. So whether it's self-scheduling of meetings and interviews, we see a much higher adoption of that now through JazzHR. Use of e-documents and e-signature capability as you're hiring someone, that has spiked up from where it was before. We talked before the call started, Audrey, on interviewing and video interviewing and the importance of that. So we're certainly seeing adoptions there. So I think that some of these tools, because they are more efficient, will continue post-COVID. But I think I still think the human interaction and the face-to-face is going to be important as well.
So let's go, Jonathan. There's two questions, one from Zach and one from Robin, if you can ask them.
Yeah, we'll start with Zach. Zach wants to know, what is JazzHR's view on the staffing industry, and how does JazzHR align or work with staffing firms?
So we do work with the staffing industry. We are seeing a large increase in job postings to the staffing industry right now. So I think that as the economy begins to recover, and right now there's a case to be made that hopefully only in the near term we're going the other way, as the economic news and the labor markets are going to follow the health news, which is not good right now. My personal belief is I think it's going to stay choppy through the first quarter of next year, and then hopefully we begin to emerge. But we are, staffing industries are another way for businesses to bring on workers, be they kind of short term or temporary in nature or full time. And so just as we're seeing a lift in jobs posted by direct employers, we're seeing a similar, in fact, maybe even a larger increase in staffing industry participation right now.
Interesting. And so Robin Nibison wants to know, have you seen a change in entry mid-level positions being posted less and senior being higher?
So a great question. I actually don't have the answer to that, so I don't want to misstate either way. So I'll pass on that, but it's a good question.
Yeah, it is a good question. So, the other thing that I wanted to touch upon is this whole hiring remotely, right? So I live in Pittsburgh and my team has been in Pittsburgh, but now since COVID, I can hire Pete, who's living in, Nashua, New Hampshire. Are you seeing those trends? Do you see that through your engagement? And if so, what do you think about that?
We are seeing that, and I think I think as businesses that previously, as we talked about it a minute or so ago, were let's say close to 100% in office, I think that's going to start to change. And as that changes, whether the person is 30 miles from my office or 300 miles, doesn't really matter. So I do think that changes. That also means that recruiting will need to change with it. Because all of a sudden you could be seeing candidate flow not only from a geographic area around your office, but from anywhere in the country, maybe anywhere in the world. And so that can cause its own challenges by just a flood of candidates. We have some examples of jobs in Pittsburgh, not so much on the service side that have opened, but in the kind of the art space, and some other categories in Pittsburgh. I've got my cheat sheet here, that are seeing as much as 1,000 candidates. Here we go. Arts, entertainment, and recreation, as many as 1,000 candidates per open job. So one job and you're getting 1,000 candidates. So all of a sudden you need, as a hiring manager, you need tools to sift through that, because if you're getting 1,000 candidates, odds are there's a handful that are going to be really well suited for what you're looking for, but that means you got to sift through 900 and some odd others to get to those people. So there's technology that can make your life easier, both in terms of keyword searches of resumes and some of the knockout questions or screening questions that I referenced earlier, and things that you can do to make that process easier. But as remote work becomes more prevalent, remote hiring is going to also have to change, and the use of how you get there is through improved technologies.
Well, it's also, what about branding? So, we might know all about JazzHR here and in Boston, but perhaps not in other locations, right?
That's right. That's right.
So how, what have you seen some strategies in terms of what companies have done to get their brand out that might be, helpful to our listeners?
There's two ways to think about brand. There's the brand of the company that their customers may know about. Then there's the employer brand the candidates may know about. And for recruiting remotely, you're really talking about employer brand. And if you're in a geocentric business, probably unrealistic to think that candidates who you might want to have be interested in your company 1,000 miles away are going to have heard of you, and it may become cost prohibitive to driving that brand awareness. But having said that, things like an ability to very easily post jobs on multiple job boards, and not only the big national job boards that we all know and love, but if I'm in Boston and I want to post a job in Pittsburgh and no one in Pittsburgh has heard of my company in Boston, well, through companies like JazzHR, again, and our competitors, I can very easily go to the Carnegie Mellon or the Pitt website and post on their job boards. And that allows me to get kind of geo-focused, if I choose to do so, into specific cities. And again, it's technology that enables that, and it's done through just a couple of clicks.
So you have a partnership, right? A relationship with the company called Wedge.
We do.
Can you talk about that?
So Wedge is a terrific company. They're focused on video interviewing, and what they enable our customers to do is if I want to, let's say I'll go back to that example I gave where we've got some companies in Pittsburgh that are seeing as many as 1,000 candidates, right? Well, let's say I winnow that down to 15 or 20 I'm interested in, but even to do 15 or 20 screening interviews is a significant investment in time. So through Wedge, as the hiring manager, I'm able to send a link to a candidate who will and give them 3 or 4 questions I'd like them to answer. And through video, they answer those questions, they send them back. And then at my kind of leisure, when I have time, I can watch them answer those 3 or 4 questions. And it gives you a sense of not only kind of what the words are, but how do they, depending on what the role, if it matters, how do they carry themselves and so forth, to give you a sense of the person. So that's what our partnership with Wedge does. And we're grateful to be working with them, and terrific company.
Wow, that's really a fascinating offering. So it really is. I mean, you really have to be very intentional. I would imagine that candidates really have to think through how they're presenting themselves.
They do. And the interesting thing is, so, for us anyway, like I want someone who's gonna, before I just fire up my computer and turn on my camera, I want someone who's gonna perhaps thought about this for an hour or so and really compose some answers, because they can take all the time they want before they answer them. Wow. And we want someone who's thoughtful and intentional that way. But if they're to just take perhaps a more haphazard approach, well, maybe that's not the kind of person we're looking for here. So and again, going back to our earlier conversation, it really fits also with remote hiring tools, right? It's the way we can do these kinds of things that not only is efficient when you want to get through a number of candidates, but helps when we can't be sitting down in an office.
Have you seen any good, that's really great to know. That's a great offering. And I think that's a whole area that's probably untapped. Have you seen any companies that have been really successful where they're very local, and that during this last year, they're out there trying to attract candidates from some of those hard to find positions, do a good job of trying to penetrate into areas where they might not be known? Have you seen any examples?
Certainly, again, I just think that the adoption of so many of our remote tools speaks to that. And so some companies are going to be more kind of advanced and progressive in this way than others. But certainly, like anything, if you put a little bit of effort in, and once you kind of get the hang of it and realize it's, the technology for all of us can be intimidating. But once you kind of pop the hood and figure it out, you realize it's not that difficult. So certainly, if you're willing to invest a little bit of time in how you can reach and engage with candidates remotely, absolutely. We're our jobs listed with JazzHR are way up. Our hires are way up. Again, in some areas, not others, unfortunately, but we're seeing people have success with this for sure.
So what about JazzHR? You hiring? Tell us a little bit about your locations and what your strategies are for hiring and your needs.
So we're based in Pittsburgh, and we've got about 2/3 of our employees there. We've got about 1/3 of our employees outside of Boston, and we went into a hiring freeze in the April timeframe, simply because we sell recruiting solutions to the SMB market. We had no idea what was going to happen. Like we are thinking we're selling the product nobody needs to the market hardest hit by the pandemic. We might want to be a little more conservative in our own hiring approach. Well, we came through this in gangbusters. In fact, the third quarter, the most recently ended quarter, was the single best quarter of JazzHR's history. So now we are hiring aggressively. I think we've got 10 or 15 open roles right now. We've hired 4 or 5 people this month. So we are hiring in sales, in customer support, in engineering, in product, in finance, virtually every area of the company right now. So we're growing rapidly and are staffing accordingly.
So yeah, I mean, that's exciting. And, it's exciting to see that this company that came out of Alpha Lab is now, getting the kind of exposure and traction after these years is really proud for all of us in Pittsburgh. When you assumed the leadership role with this, with what was then, we knew it as Resumator, but now JazzHR. When you took over at JazzHR, what did you know about Pittsburgh?
Honestly, very little, other than I was a huge Patriots fan, and the rivalry with the Steelers was top of mind always. And so my first year at JazzHR, I was in Pittsburgh every single week. So I had an apartment there, and I was there Monday through Thursday night for a year. And that was great, not only for the work, which was really challenging and rewarding and so forth, but getting to know, effectively living in Pittsburgh midweek every week was wonderful, because it's an area I didn't really know. And I still have a lot to learn, but I probably had this image of Pittsburgh that was similar to most people who don't know Pittsburgh, and that is, well, this is kind of this old steel town. And then you realize, I mean, I guess that's kind of true, but nothing could be further from the truth in terms of how the city is flourishing, and completely reinvented itself. And the fact that all these West Coast mostly, but some East Coast technology firms now have such large presences in Pittsburgh, coupled with healthcare, is the industry turnaround is remarkable. The building is phenomenal. Even since I've been there, the amount of development that's happened with downtown area is incredible. So it's been a delight to be able to see that and learn about it.
Well, good. So what do you, you're a great ambassador for us then back in Boston, I'm sure.
I am actually. I say, you don't know Pittsburgh till you go.
Great. Well, I can't thank you enough. First of all, it is thrilling. I can't say it enough, right, Jonathan? We've watched them from Resumator to go to JazzHR and
when Don was spinning it up, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah.
Well, we're all here because of Don Charlton, so we're grateful for that every day.
Definitely.
Yeah,
What a good dude.
quite very visionary on this. So if people want to know more about our partnership that we have with them, we put the links out there. If you missed it, just reach out to any one of us at the Tech Council. Go to JazzHR, see the kinds of work that they do. See if there's opportunities for you to engage with them. I think that you'll be thrilled. I love hearing about your new engagements on your Wedge, the Wedge technology. I definitely think, Pete, that's here to stay. And I do really appreciate the examples that you've given us in terms of, it's exhaustive to try to recruit and to do that with, keeping the cadence of the brand of your company and making sure that you're not dropping the ball on anything. And I applaud this work. I think that 2021 will be great for you. And we look forward to keeping in touch. And if you want to look for any of the opportunities to work at Jazz, just go to their site as well. They do have a career link on there that you can navigate through. And then I also want to tell everyone that we're pretty booked for the next couple of weeks up until Christmas. Monday, we actually have leadership from Allegheny Health Networks. That's going to be talking about all things related to vaccine and safety and quality and the things that they're working on that I think are going to turn the corner for many of us and hopefully most of us across the United States over the next quarter, which include vaccinations and trends thereof. So we're going to get an update on how we're doing. I know the numbers were very high today and we had a sad number of deaths very tragic over this last week. So we are doing what we can to make sure that we're keeping ourselves just apprised and engaged and keeping information right at your fingertips so that you know what's happening. So I want to thank you, Pete. Stay safe. If I don't talk to you, have a wonderful holiday. For those of you that celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah, and have a safe weekend. That's all. Safety is my big word. So I'm repeating myself, but I want to thank everyone. Thanks again, Pete. Thanks for your leadership and for being a great ambassador.
Thank you, Audrey.
See you guys.